Welcome to Talking with Tech. My name's Chris Bouguet, and I'm here with Rachel Madel. Rachel, something's been plaguing me for a while, and I want to ask you all about it because I haven't heard, and I need an update. So I think you're working with a student that enjoys ceiling fans, right? And I got to meet him once, and I've just been in fact, I remember on New Year's, I went out and it was a place that had this giant ceiling fan, and I took a picture of it, of me with it and sent it to you to show him. How's he doing? How's he doing with his writing?
You know what's so funny, Chris, is that not only do you know this student, but after that podcast recording, I had other people sending me messages about fans and things like that. So I feel like he's becoming very well known on this podcast. So would love to give an update. I love this student. He's by far one of my favorites, and have been working with him since he was little, since he was like a little preschooler. And now he's a teenager. So basically one thing that I've been really trying to work on in a different way. I haven't done this before with students. Of course, I've worked on writing and things like that, because this student, has some challenges with verbal organization. So like he goes to share, and you can just see his brain working really hard to kind of formulate. And of course, with like syntax and grammar and all those things, it becomes really challenging in real time. So I found that when I work on formulating and organization in writing, it translates to him better being able to kind of organize his thoughts when he's speaking, which has been super powerful for him. And oftentimes when I'm trying to figure out like, how do I right now, like he also is working on irregular past tense. So it's coming out a little wonky in his verbal speech. And so we're working on it in his writing, and now he's kind of the writing process kind of slows things down for kids, helps them kind of reflect. And I've been seeing some improvements in not only in irregular past tense with his writing, he's catching himself more, but also I'm seeing him catch himself when he's speaking. So anyway, I've been working on writing with him for a while now. And I started doing creative writing because I was finding that like I was helping to support what was happening in his classroom and his homework and all these things, which was helpful for me to see as a therapist, but it was just stuff that he didn't care about. Like he just wasn't interested in, reading about like orca whales or like whatever it is that like he was tasked to read about and then write about. And so I was like, what if I, create some type of writing experience that gets him really excited. And so one day it was just like, we're going to write a story together, because I knew that like just having him write, it was going to like, and like, it was just pulling teeth oftentimes trying to get him to write something. And so I'm like, I'm going to start the story and then we're going to take turns. And so he also uses text-to-speech, really helpful for him when he's formulating. Also just like so many other things, like he's noticing grammar and all these other things with, we use Google Read and Write. Anyway, so I start this story. I'm like, it's New Year's Day, and I look out my window and I see the craziest thing. And then I'm like, okay, it's your turn. And so when we first started doing this, like he kind of didn't really know exactly what to do. And I was having to take a lot of turns. I was like, okay. And he got really good at saying, okay, it's your turn. And I was like, okay, sure, I'll take a turn. And then I started just really like being as silly as possible. And we kind of set up this structure around, he's really into trains in addition to ceiling fans. So of course I'm like, how do I incorporate trains and ceiling fans into this story? And so with a suspense element, which he started getting really excited about. So we got into this rhythm of, he would start writing something, and then I would write something that kind of took the story in a different direction. And then, I would wait for him to respond. And long story short, like it's been so cool to see how this has really empowered him to write, to the point where, now, I've only been doing this for a couple months, but now he is not hardly ever asking, me to take a turn, which is super exciting. And when he does, he has like very specific parameters around the turn. He's like, name something that's a vehicle. And like, he's like very much has an idea of like what he wants this story to look like. I'm like, I don't have to take a turn. You can just write. And so it's been really cool to see how excited he is. The other thing I'll share is he's so dialed into the time. So I see him virtually. And he knows at the 50-minute mark, which we do 50-minute sessions in my practice. At the 50-minute mark, he knows like speech therapy is over. And we're actually working on him not just like shutting the laptop and not saying goodbye. So, he now knows like, okay, like, it's 4:50. And what's so cool, Chris, is that like he was always on top of the time. He's now not noticing the time. Like he's so engaged in the writing process and getting so much joy out of this writing experience. This story is called a trip to Ecuador. And like, it's just the most outlandish story with, pigs that can fly and, trains that have, unicorns on them. And, it's just been so cool. And the last session, I was like, I wonder how long I can see if he won't notice the time. And he made it 6 minutes past our session time. And I was just like, I had to like interrupt him because I was like, I have another session. Like I need to run to the bathroom before this next session. And so I was like, hey, like, guess what? Like it's time. And it's just like, it's so cool because now when he sees me, he's so excited. The first thing he asks is, can we keep writing? And I'm like, I'm literally just smiling so big because it's just so cool. Like, and it's just, I already knew to like, follow a child's interests and passions and curiosities, make it fun, make it engaging. But, it's just another great reminder that when we can create these opportunities for our students, we can really engage them in the learning process in a way that doesn't feel like I have to do this thing, I have to learn this thing. Like he's excited about opening the computer and starting to write out a story. And so it's just been so fun for me as a clinician. I'm like, wow, like how have I not done kind of this co-writing situation before? It's like such a great way to scaffold for students. And I'm also like, I've taught him how to do dialogue back and forth, and that's translating to him better able to kind of engage in dialogue in real life with peers. So it's just like it's been so cool to see him transform.
Yeah, you've got so many skills in there. Like you said, the turn taking and now using the dialogue as a model. And then you have the metric of how he started out not really wanting to do it to now, and maybe even being a little averse to writing because it had been maybe, I don't know what the point of it is, or I've been forced to do it in some way. To now I can generate anything I want. I have some follow-up questions. Okay. So here's my first one. You mentioned using voice recording. Voice, like speech to text, right? The voice typing in Google Docs, right? Mm-hmm. How, has that evolved at all? Because what tends to happen is a kid, we show somebody that, and then they just ramble and it just becomes this big block of text without any periods or punctuation and blah, 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 and then they have to learn the skill of adding those things. So I'm curious about the evolution of that, if I'm spot on there or not quite yet.
Yeah. So we've tried kind of the voice typing, and I think he struggles with that in a lot of ways just because the verbal component is where he gets stuck. But we do use the text to speech. So him hearing what he's typing has been really powerful. We're also working on the editing process because he used to just have like 3 paragraphs worth of text that was 1 sentence. And I was like, let's talk about what a run-on sentence is. And so, as things have come up, I've thought, okay, like I need to do more explicit teaching about run-ons. So like before we engage in the writing, it's like, okay, we're going to do a lesson on run-ons and like fragments and what does that look like and find them, right? And so that's kind of come up and he's gotten a lot better. Again, I'm talking about irregular past tense. And so now I'm like, we're going to kind of doing some lessons around that. And then we get to the writing and I'm like, oh, like don't forget about irregular past tense. And so he's kind of scanning the text and being like, oh, this is, I made a mistake here. So that process has really evolved for him. And it's really cool because he's actually editing and, revising in real time now. It used to be like he would just like put something on paper and then like run away from it. And now I see him kind of going back, deleting in real time, which is super cool to see kind of how he's progressed there. So yeah, we're using those tools. The voice typing isn't, I think it's just hard because like he does have a hard time formulating. And I don't think he loves going back and editing. So I feel like he's just like, I'd rather just type it. And he's actually become a super fast typer. So that has been great because as he's typing, if he makes a mistake, he hears the mistake and he stops and he like changes it.
Okay, I have a thought about that. So it sounds like the evolution was from speech to text to I can just be faster with typing. Do you find that he's got this idea and then he sees that he spelled things wrong because the little red squiggly comes up or a little blue squiggly comes up, and then he's got to hit the back and change it, and then he goes to type some more, and then there's another red squiggly, so back, and then is there potential for him to forget what the next sentence was going to be, like what he wanted to write? Do you find any consternation around that, or not really? He's not losing his train of thought.
It's so interesting because I feel like attention is one of the things that I feel like he's challenged with the most, but not when he's motivated. So like I don't feel like he's totally honed in on like, here's what I want to say. Here's what, like, he's so engaged. Like I don't lose him for a second. And I feel like that's so classic ADHD, right? It's like, I can focus on the things that I'm really excited and care about, but I can't focus on the things that I'm not super interested in. So when he gets to choose what he writes about, then yes, he's like super dialed in. We've also kind of been working on, he's kind of in this rhythm with kind of this story. It's like usually like a light in the distance or a sound in the distance. Like, what is it? And like, so he's really embraced this. So now I'm trying to get him kind of venturing out of that a little bit. So I'm like really changing the story, and I'm kind of trying to set more like newer structures that can be predictable and exciting. But so instead of like a light or a sound, it's like this character says something crazy, and like, how do we respond to that? So that's been really interesting too, to kind of help him evolve. Because I think like many kids, he loved that first experience where we did it, and now he's locked into it, and now he kind of wants to keep recreating it with a little bit of variety each time, which is totally fine. But I'm trying to get him to keep expanding and to keep growing.
Do you use some sort of visual support? Like, so you mentioned the characters, for instance. So some sort of like, here's what a character is, and so now describe the character and where they're from and what they look like and what they like, and some sort of visual that maps that out. Is there stuff like that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, we use Canva. So what usually happens though is we kind of create a Canva image based off of his story. So I was thinking we could kind of turn that on its head and do the opposite. So like create something and then write about it, because I feel like that's oftentimes it's like we're asking students to read something and then write about it, or to kind of put more structure around it. So I could do more of that kind of pre-teaching or character development, because I feel like that is the next step for him. But what's super cool is that I'm using the kind of generative AI tools on Canva, and like, this kid is such a whiz at like figuring out what to type in to create the image that he wants. And like, this was not taught. Like, I showed it to him once and he's like, I've got it. And like, he thinks it's so fun to go in there and be like, a pig with butterfly wings and sunglasses. Like, it's just like, and then it's like, if it doesn't come with what he wants, he's now like knowing how to like layer images. So it's like, oh, the pig's flying, but he doesn't like the sunglasses. So he like will find a separate set of sunglasses, remove the background, put it on the pig. I'm like, this is wild. I'm like, he's so good at Canva, to the point where I told his mom, I was like, you need to like foster more of this at home. Like, this is like a free time thing to like really, like, I don't know that he would go to it on his own, but I think if we keep showing him how to go to it on his own and kind of walking away from it, I feel like he could spend hours on Canva creating lots of cool things, and also lots of stories that he could potentially write on his own.
Oh, sounds so much fun. All right, I have one last question. he sounds like he's writing the story for him and a little bit of you. Is there a plan to publish or share it with a wider audience than just the two of you, or not really? Maybe just mom and dad or family members, or really, hey, the whole world. My friend Chris, who you sent you pictures of the fan, he would love to read this, like that kind of thing.
It's a really good question. So I've definitely shared it with his parents. And the way that I've approached it is I will go in and highlight in red the things that I wrote, just so they have a sense. And it's cool to see over time because there's less and less red in the story. So I've definitely shared it with his parents, and they're like, wow, like we can't believe he's doing this. And it's exciting because every time I hop on Zoom, he's like, can we write the story? Can we write the story? Like, he's just so excited to write the story. And, his parents get to see how excited he is about writing, which is great. I do think there's an opportunity to encourage him to share and to have conversations around that. I hadn't thought about that. Obviously, I thought about sharing it with his parents, but it's a really good idea to share with someone else. So you just gave me my idea. I'm seeing him later today, so I will report back how it went.
Yeah, even if it's anonymously, right? That might be awesome. Or maybe it's just shared with my one friend first, and then there's some other place that could be posted later. But there could be other kids that benefit from reading that story, right? And practice their literacy skills using that story, or do fan fiction off of his story, right? So there's some more good there that can be mined. So that's so awesome, Rachel.
Yes, I am so excited to see him just really flourish. And it's cool, especially as students start to get older, you start thinking how can this translate to a career, a profession? What skills can I start fostering so that he can feel confident and he can practice, doing these things and hopefully turn it into a career one day. And so it's been really cool to see how much he's loved this. And also just for me as a clinician, it's been cool to figure out how can I keep supporting this? How can I keep kind of targeting some of the things I feel like would be really helpful for him and make a really big impact, and doing it around something that he has just come to love and be super passionate about.
Yeah. And not just the writing, all those other ancillary skills that you were mentioning, like time management, like remembering that you say goodbye before you go. Those are just some examples. Taking turns and the dialogue, and then that translates into conversation. All of those skills layered on top of writing. Well, speaking of writing, Rachel, the interview today is with Amy Mayer, and Amy has written a book. But the way I first met Amy is that her and I were kind of put together in a situation where we got to present together and maybe be on a podcast together, I think, talking about writing. So she helps students with the writing process, but beyond that, that's just one aspect of what she does. And she had the opportunity to write a book. So we talk a little bit about that as well. So without further ado, here's my interview with Amy Mayer.
We'd like to thank all of the wonderful Patreon supporters who make this show possible. This podcast is funded by listeners just like you who've signed up at patreon.com/talkingwithtech to show their support. Because of the generosity of our amazing Patreon community, we're able to pay Luke and Michaela, our podcast producer and audio engineer, who keep the show looking and sounding great. Patreon supporters also receive bonus content, such as early access to interviews, behind-the-scenes recordings, additional curated resources and materials, and so much more. Check it out at patreon.com/talkingwithtech.
Welcome to the Talking with Tech podcast. My name is Chris Bouguet, and today I'm joined with I'm going to say longtime friend. It's been, a handful of years. Amy Mayer. Amy, how's it going?
It's going great. It's so good to see you, Chris.
Good. All right, so let's talk a little bit about who you are and what you do, and then let's get into how you and I met, because I think that's an interesting story too. But
it is.
Let's get everybody else on the same page as you and I with who you are and what you do.
Okay. Well, I own a company called Fried Tech. Hopefully, some of your audience has heard of it or learned with us in the past. And we are a professional development company and we work in the education space. So we're I mean, I think literally, I think now every single person who works here is a former educator. So we have around 20 employees, and we do professional development in person and virtually for teachers and other groups of educators across the United States. We're really well known in Google circles, so we're best known as a Google PD provider, and we also really do a lot of B2B work. So, for example, companies like I'll use Adobe as an example, as probably our most exciting partnership in the last year. We do a lot of professional development for companies like Adobe. And then for some of the companies we work with, we create content for them. And you may be interacting with or using that content on the web and not know that it's written by, produced by, created by us because they put their name on it. So we just do all kinds of stuff in the education space like that.
Okay, that's awesome. And I'd be fair to say that it's very technology focused, but technology with the backdrop to good pedagogy. Is that fair?
Yes, it is. And we're really kind of trying to, like, I think you and I have talked about this in relationship to assistive tech before, how when I started reading your book, I had this epiphany of, oh, this is just like what every teacher either is doing or should be doing. Like, this is not a special group of people. This is not for people with a certain job title. Like, I had that moment, and we're trying to get people, we're trying to claw our way out of the ed tech box because our perspective is like, it's 2024. There's not a teacher who's not using technology. So this is just teaching now. Like, it's not a separate, we don't stop school and do computer time, now. So we're really doing a lot of work in, we are calling them, like specialized areas, but English language learners and special education students with behavioral issues. We have a ton of expertise on our team. And this is stuff like, it's like, why didn't somebody tell us this when we were teachers? Like, we needed to know this stuff. So it really is all just about teaching and how to do the job under what just become, just increasingly difficult circumstances.
Well, we will get into those, I think, in a second. Let me take us back to how you and I met, because
Yeah.
I think that's an interesting story, is that you and I didn't know each other. I wasn't familiar with your company. I don't think you were familiar with my work, but we were both working separately with TextHelp. And you were using some of their products and sharing some of their products. And certainly I was in my neck of the woods, both in my local school district that I work for, but then beyond. And TextHelp connected us and said, were they doing something like some sort of webinar or something? And they said, hey,
Yes.
we don't have spots for each of you. What if you guys do it together? It's like, I don't know who that person is, but okay. I mean, if TextHelp, I trust them. If they think we're going to get, and then we got along fabulously. I mean, at least I thought I did. I thought we did.
We did. And there's another facet to that. And I don't know if you heard this part or know this part, because I think I learned it in person and I don't know if I ever shared it with you. And I think it's Kira from TextHelp who saw you presenting. And she told me later that when she was watching you present, she already knew me. She was watching you present. So she's meeting you. She said to herself, I have got to introduce Amy and Chris. Like, they were going to get along so well. And she couldn't really even put her finger on why, but she knew that we needed to meet each other. And so she had been looking opportunity since then for us to meet each other. And then she was like, I told her, like, you're completely right. We just have such a viewpoint. But at the same time, like, your experience has been so different from mine. I always feel like I learned something when we talk. I don't feel like we're an echo chamber. It's just different enough that we understand each other, but I learned something new from you. And I love that about our friendship that has developed.
Agreed. Same. I mean, we had never really had a conversation about worksheets right? Yet
We
a
both
little.
wrote a book about it,
I
though.
know, that's exactly it. So let's get into that. Let's talk a little bit
Okay.
about the new book coming out. So, again, full disclosure, I got a advanced copy and wrote a little blurb for it, and you got an advanced copy of my second edition of my book to write an advanced copy. So let's get that out there. But we knew we would they were similar themes, like you said, not an echo chamber, but certainly sibling texts, even though they're from different
Yes.
publishing companies and everything. So let's talk about your book. So it's called
Okay.
Beyond Worksheets.
Yes, exactly right. Beyond worksheets. And I have a fake version of it right here. So I don't know if your eventual viewers will be seeing this or just hearing it, but this is what the cover's going to look like, Chris. So I'm excited about it. I did not know how hard it was to do that. I have even more respect for you that you work as an educator full time and how many books have you written now?
Well, there's chapters in some books, and then full books. It's two full books, but with partners and with second edition. It's hard to just like I guess there's three, but all with other people. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but it's very impressive that you have done that. I thought that it was a really difficult, and I felt like you have to sort of like dig into your soul somehow, like you do know, I know you know, and that's what I felt like I did. And I I really had to go back into my memory banks, and then I had to look at things with the eyes of what I know today, and that was hard to do sometimes too, because I felt like I hate reading things I don't feel are authentic.
Hmm.
Like I really want people, if I'm going to take the time to get in your head, then open the door all the way up, like I want to be in there. And so, I had to go back into my teaching career and reflect on things I had done and what had gone horribly wrong and all that kind of stuff. And I did that, and it was like emotionally draining on top of being challenging, like keeping myself on the schedule and all that.
Yeah, that is definitely one of the hardest parts. And we didn't use, I'm going to guess you didn't use ChatGPT when
No,
you wrote it, right? This is all sort of predates this new technology, which I want to talk to you and pick your brain about that as well.
I have a ton to say about that, and I could have used Chat GPT because for most of the time that I was writing this book, Chat GPT did exist. I just finished it, a
Mhm.
couple of months ago.
Oh, well, okay, then let's talk about that because I know when I was finishing my book, ChatGPT just came out, and I was like, in that stage of wrestling, like, well, is it okay to use it? I think it's okay to use all that, where I feel like a lot of that has been ironed out or it's in the process of being ironed out. At least in my own mind, I've had come to some decisions about it. So how did you approach it? And did you use it?
Well, it's a good question, and I absolutely did not use it. Not one word of it is written by Chat GPT, and I'll tell you why. Um, while I was in the process of writing my book, my publisher, Josie Bass, sent me a lot of advanced copies of books. And one of the books that they sent me was about AI, and it intrigued me. So I have a friend I work with, a partner company that I work with on AI, and I tell him like, Jim, you're my best AI teacher. Like he drip feeds me information about AI every day. So I talk about AI every single day with a person who is truly an expert. I feel so like honored to have that education. So it wasn't that I didn't know anything about it, but I wanted to read this book that is about how AI is impacting education. I'm purposefully not saying what the title of the book is. Um, I don't even remember it. I couldn't tell you if I wanted to. I don't even remember it. So I got this book in the mail, like didn't ask for it, didn't know I was getting it, opened the box up. I thought, okay, this is really interesting. Like clearly this is a subject I'm truly interested in and I need to know about this. So I open up the book and I start reading the book and I read the preface of the book and I think that sounds like something generated by a computer, but maybe he just used it for the preface. Maybe he uploaded his book and then had it write the preface to the book. So I carry on to chapter 1 to see if it gets any better. I did not make it past chapter 1 because to me, it sounds like what AI would say if I went to Chat GPT and said, write a book about AI in education. It did not have a soul.
Yes,
And
that's the word. It's
that's
sort of
the
missing.
problem, right?
Yeah.
There was no soul in it. And I really wanted my book to be soulful. I feel like teaching is such a soulful profession. It is not there are elements of science, but it is artistic and it is people oriented and it is compassion and empathy and who that wants to be a part of our profession wants to read a book that doesn't have those elements. Like,
Hmm.
we don't want to read that. I don't want to write that. They don't want to read that, as was my thought about it. And after I read that preface and chapter 1 of that book, I vowed to myself that I would not use Chat GPT.
Hmm.
And I did not use Chat GPT, but I did use, a friend of mine has a consulting company and she has a wonderful guy who works for her named Alan. And I had an Alan, and Alan is a real guy who is also an educator. He has been a teacher. And Alan worked on the book with me, and he did the things that I would have asked ChatGPT to do, but as a real human being. He read every chapter. He gave me feedback on it. He said, hey, what if we add in this piece? And what if everyone's got at least this many? And what if you write another chapter and it's about this? So he did all of those things that I think people are trying to get ChatGPT to do with them, that
Hmm.
some of them ChatGPT is good at, and some of them it's not so good at. But Alan, a real human being, helped me with it in the way that I think people are trying to use the tool.
Yeah, like a first reader to give you the feedback that you
Yes.
need to say, is this going to resonate, or am I in my own head about this, or I'm stuck?
Yes.
Can you push me in a and can I just tell you a quick story? That is exactly what happened with the new assistive tech, the first edition. I remember I was walking around the neighborhood with my wife. I had finished it. I had sent it off to the publisher, and I'm like, something's off. I go, this is my second book. The first one I had written with a co-author, and it just felt better. It felt more connected, and there was just something off with it. And I couldn't I just was too close to it. I
Right.
needed some outside help. And my publisher gave me that. Like, she took it to 3 peer reviewers. 2 of them did the nice thing, like, oh, it's all great. Yeah, yeah, yeah. But one, which was the most valuable feedback, sort of raked me over the coals. Like, I would never buy this.
What
This
did
is
she
just,
say?
well, just it was disjointed. It wasn't connected. The ideas are there. I see where he's going, but it doesn't have a flow to it. It needs to consider changing the order. And I was like, yes, everything that
That's
this
what you
one, it's
needed.
like, yes, that's what's missing. I knew it, but I didn't know it. I mean, like, I knew it
Right.
was missing, but I didn't know how to fix
You
it.
had an instinct.
Yes, that was, maybe it was Alan. Maybe Alan was hired to do
Yes.
that. And because
Honestly,
I didn't
that's
know who
what
my
he
reviewers
did.
were. Yeah.
Yeah, and he was super kind about it. But also, like that brutality of, this doesn't make sense. And obviously then I had an editor with the company, and then I had a peer reviewer the company hired, and I stalked her and found her on Facebook. I did not have any way to contact her. I wasn't given her email address, but her name was in the Google Doc. And so I went and found her and thanked her, because she did some of that same kind of work you're talking about, where she said, I don't like how you said this, goes all over me, like, oh yeah, you're right. Okay. But I'd never thought of it from her point of view.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And those people all have souls where ChatGPT
Yes.
doesn't. And I know so much of your book and my book share stories and insights from actual, occurrences, right? Like actual
Right.
perspectives. And I don't think ChatGPT has those. It could
No,
mock it up, you could fake it, but it would come off fake, right? And
that's how the book I read came off. It just
right.
came off fake.
Yeah, and that's why our books are not like that, right? Um,
Right.
Would you say, let's just continuing on this AI conversation, one of the presentations you and I did together with Text Help was all about writing. And then we went to ISTE, you and I presented together, and it was about writing. So for students, would you see ChatGPT as a tool to punch up your writing, get you started when you're stuck? Use it in that capacity. No biases here, because my friends, like, I give it to my friend, I might feel judgmental and they might be judging me about this, but ChatGPT's not going to, wouldn't judge me that way. Well, I'll put it this way. It's in quotes, unbiased,
Right.
unbiased
Right.
about
A
me.
biased, unbiased tool.
It's a
Right.
biased but unbiased tool, exactly, because it's not biased towards me in any way. Like those 2 people that were like just going, yeah, it's great because we like Chris. Yeah, but I need the real feedback. So my
Right.
point being is, how are you thinking about it as a student use tool?
Well, we have an online course through our Fried Online portal, and it is about using AI as a teacher, and we broach that subject. And what my advice would be to someone is, since the technology exists, it's the most groundbreaking technology since Google search was invented. And it is, the potential that it has is far greater even than Google search. So it is it's probably the most profound technology that will come out in our lifetimes, most likely. So we can't just pretend it doesn't exist. And that makes us hypocrites as educators. And once you see what it can do for you as an educator, you're going to use it. You should use it. You shouldn't feel like sad about it or have like emotional conflicts about it or whatever. If it can do the job that you need done better than you can, then you should use it. It's ridiculous not to. It's like, I know people who have a dishwasher and hand wash all their dishes and use the dishwasher to dry their. Put your dishes in there, people. Just put the dishes in the dishwasher and turn it on. It's what it's for. So it's like a dishwasher in that way. Dishwasher is better at washing dishes than me. I'm going to let it do its job.
Yeah. And an oven might be better to cook your food on a regular basis than going outside and making a whole,
Yes,
fire pit, you know what I mean? To cook
it's
every meal.
better.
Yeah, it's just better.
Right.
Yeah.
It's better, and you're going to use it for what it's right for. And along those lines, as a teacher, I really believe in being honest with students and creating a situation that is not hypocritical. So as a teacher, my students already know it exists and they've already been using it because they don't suffer the same pangs of conscience perhaps that I do. So it's already happening. How unfair is it and how inequitable is it if my only students who don't have access to it are people who are constrained by their conscience and feel it's wrong? And I haven't had that discussion with them, but they intrinsically believe that. And so now I have just left a subset of my students who are using it. And what is happening to my colleague, Brooke, her niece is in a prestigious school. And what she realized was, all of my classmates are using this and I'm not. And so my grades are lower than theirs only because they're using this tool. And so we've had a lot of discussions around here at Fried Tech about what is ethical use of it. How do I make sure I'm being ethical? And I would, as a teacher, I think I would have those conversations with my students, and I hope I would have them doing a lot, probably even more writing than they ever did in class with me, using something like Google Docs that's got the revision history so I can see, that this was organically generated text. And then I think we've got to practice. And honestly, ChatGPT is better at giving feedback to a writer who's learning than I am. It's not better at writing with soul, but that feedback is amazing. And so I would have my students organically generate text and then put it into ChatGPT and ask for feedback. And I would teach them how to do that. And I would get them doing it and get them revising based on what ChatGPT, advises them to do. And still, obviously, we still got to have human readers. We still got to have peer editors, but it's amazing at that. Like, why not use it?
I could not agree more, of course.
Oh, yay.
Well, let's just talk about some of the things you touched upon. One is the equity issue. If an educator or someone said, we're not using this tool, and then a handful of years later, you're out in the workforce and everyone has learned how to use this tool and you haven't, have you really prepared people for the future?
Right.
Which is really what school is about, right? Preparing people for the future. So you're kind of putting people at a disadvantage. I legit see within the year, if it's not already happening, places interviewing saying, tell me how you use AI.
Absolutely. It's already happening.
Right.
I have one friend who recently her position was ended at the company that she was working at. I understand enough about what she was doing in her job to know that AI can do that job. I'm fairly certain that either they hired someone who knows how to use AI to do the job so that they can do it much faster and better, or they didn't replace that position at all. They truly riffed it and they saved that money. and whoever was managing her before is now using AI to do what was in her job. Is that
Yeah.
the situation we want our students to be in, or do we want them to have many varied experiences with the technology so they really understand it and what it can do, and they're not intimidated when somebody asks them that question in an interview? It's a question I would ask somebody if I were interviewing somebody tomorrow for a position at Fried Tech. Do I want you struggling with a spreadsheet for a solid day to get information out of it, or using ChatGPT to do it, or Bard or whatever? There's another one my friend Jim tells me about all the time where you can upload documents. I always forget the name of it, but all those services can do that work in 5 minutes that it may literally take you hours. It would take me hours to do it. Of course, I want you to use the tool.
And one of the reasons you'll be better at using that tool is if you have minutes where you've practiced it, made some mistakes around it, realize that it wasn't as simple as like uploading the spreadsheet or the PDF and giving me the answer. There's a whole conversation that I have to have with it to really get it to do or get the answer that I'm at, which it's a whole learning experience.
It's a whole job, even like prompt engineer. Like it's people are joking about it, but it's not funny. It's a real thing, interacting with computers in a completely new way than any of us has ever done before.
Now, from a writing, going back to using it for giving feedback to your own writing, I know that my son has a girlfriend and she is in college and studying creative writing, and they are using it to do, okay, you write something on this thing and ChatGPT will write something, and now compare and contrast. So you can learn where you need to add more soul and add more human and be like, oh, I see why that doesn't. And analyzing those two is different. And looking for the hallucinations, like, again, finding out what it's good at and finding out how you can be better at it. One, so that, again, you can use the tool better, but two, so that you can communicate to others why you are valuable. Yes, that tool exists, but I can do it even better using that tool, right?
Yes, I love that line of thought. And so I hope that's what I would do. Talking about what you would do as a teacher when you're no longer in the classroom is, like, I think that if I were in the classroom right now hearing me say this, I'd be like, sure you would, because, it's really easy to talk about what you would do in a theoretical, but I hope that is what I would do. And I do see teachers like on social media who are having really good conversations with their students about AI and how to interact with it appropriately as a student.
Totally. I mean, I work for a public school right now, and I know teachers that are having those conversations. We have, you do professional learning, I do professional learning. We have people come and say, let's just talk about AI for 45 minutes. And there's the teachers that show up there are the ones that are passionate about it and realize the potential for it. And yes, they're doing exactly what you say, is that they're having rich conversations with the learners that they support about how to use it in an appropriate way.
I love that. Thanks, teachers.
All right, let me take it back to the book, right? So beyond worksheets, an underlying theme of your book and my book is about, and I also think this is an underlying theme of the courses that you have on your website, right? Is sort of redesigning education from a more inclusive standpoint. You mentioned multi-language learners, right? Students with disabilities, and it's so often it's thought of as here's my educational experience, and now let me adapt it for students with disabilities. But I think the underlying theme of your book and my book and my kind of our oral messages are overarching messages. Well, what if we redesigned it so we didn't have to say those people come second? What if we designed it with them in mind? And that helps everybody. So with that in mind, tell us more about your book and what are some concepts about both in your book and in your work about designing for all?
Yes, I think we really share a passion around this, and I'll tell you a story that I think answers your question, and it's a story that at least is tangentially in the book or other stories like this. I kept having a situation when I was a teacher where I would have far more students with special education modifications than anybody else who taught the same subject that I did. So, maybe there at the high school where I taught, there were maybe 5 or 6 teachers who taught the same grade level that I did, and we all had a third period class, and I would have like 2 to 3 times as many students with modifications, which, the paperwork and the meetings take longer. Like it's a bigger lift, not because of the kids, because of the sheer like workload around that.
Mm-hmm.
And I went and I actually talked to the counselor and I said, I want to know why. I need to understand why this is. Like, this is a tremendous amount of work. And, love the kids, glad to do the work, have really struggling with the time commitment that this is. Well, my answer that I got was, well, we know that you will do the mods. And the other teachers, like, we just don't think they're really doing them. So we're going to put them in your class instead. And I thought, but that's the job we have to do. You can't just not do it. So how is it okay for someone else to not do it? I had never considered not doing it. But I also did this. I taught I created learning situations where I was not really doing extra work. I was creating assignments in a way that they could be differentiated by students based on what those students needed from the assignments. And that's exactly what you talked about in your book, which, I mean, I was having all those high five moments when I was reading it, because yes, the way that you're designing the work is what is creating the differentiation. I'm filling out the paperwork and turning it in on time, but those other teachers might not feel comfortable doing that because they don't know how to design the work in a different way. And so they have to make a separate set of worksheets for those students. And when they struggle, they might not really know what to do about that. And so that is what's creating the conflict. And I know, like, I am the carpenter who only has a hammer. The only tool I have to fix problems is professional development. And so everything's a professional development problem to me. But in education, almost everything is a professional development problem. Mm-hmm. And I really it's part of what drove my passion to get into PD, because I really wanted to be able to go into Charlotte's classroom and say, Charlotte, you're making this so hard. Like, it's not as hard as you think it is. Like, what if we just approach it like this instead? And then that student who doesn't have any special education modifications is also going to get more out of it, and is also going to learn more, and is also going to bring more to the situation as a result of it. And so everybody's going to be better and your life is going to be easier. Like, how can that not be a story you want to listen to? But as a teacher, my colleagues did not want to invite me into their classrooms that were down the hallway because there's lots of feelings everybody has about it. So I realized at some point, like, I have to leave this classroom and get a different position in order to spread that message. But it really is the entire message of my whole career is basically like, no, just change how you're doing it, how you're approaching it a little bit instead, and everything will fall into place in a new way.
So there's this comic strip that jumps into my mind. I wish I knew who illustrated it, but it's these two cave people, and one cave person is pushing a square wheel, and the other one is coming up behind with a round wheel and being like, how about this? I don't have time for that right now. I got to push this square wheel. It's like, wait a second. No, but if you just did it differently, you wouldn't have to do that.
Like, you don't understand how hard this is to get this square up the hill, or else you would not be bothering me with your roundness. Right. Yes,
exactly.
That's how I feel all the time when people say they don't have time for technology PD. I always feel like that. Like, you need it more than anyone if you think you don't have time for it.
Yes. Well, and a big strategy that I have found to help people is the whole concept of growth mindset. And they often apply it to kids and the words they use with kids. And then I'd say, like, take that camera and put it on yourself. How often have you said, oh, like in my neck of the woods, I work with a lot of speech therapists. I'm a speech therapist. I don't really do that math stuff. I'm not a math person. No, you're not a math person yet. And actually, you work with data all the time. So you are a math person, right? Same thing. I'm not a technology person. Well, you're not a technology person yet, but you are now, and we're going to give you more and more skills. You will get better if you spend some time. Just open the door a little bit,
right?
Invite us in. We'll help you. We'll meet you where you're at, and we'll take you to the next step.
That is a perfect way to describe it, and we have to stop saying things like that. And I have been the most guilty person in the world of saying I'm not a math person and joking about that and everything. But in reality, if you put a dollar sign on it, I turn into a math person. Like,
Yeah,
You
you have
know,
to be
like
if you run a business, right?
you have to be like and when in your life do you not have technology? Like it's in your car, it's in your refrigerator, like it's everywhere in everything you do. It's in your TV. Oh, you don't watch TV. Oh, when your children send you pictures of your grandchildren, you can't open them up. That's so sad. Let me
Yeah.
help you. Of course you do. You will figure it out if it matters to you.
Yes, that's so true. That's so true. All right. Well, with that said, Amy, so what advice would you give some, uh, let's say a lot of people that listen to this podcast are doing professional learning in in their neck of the woods, right? They're maybe trying to teach other people about augmentative alternative communication. Maybe they're trying to teach them about inclusive design. What advice would you give to people? You work with a team of 19 other people, like or 20 other people. What are some sort of staple strategies you use when it comes to professional learning?
Well, I think that the reason why the professional learning we do is effective and beloved. And so, since I may be talking to people who don't know what we do here and have maybe even never heard of Fried Tech before, I'll tell you to kind of legitimize what I'm about to say to you that our satisfaction ratings, and I'm talking about we train, 20 to 50,000 people a year, educators a year, is 4.7 out of 5. And we really try hard to get every single person who learns with us to do an evaluation. And the other piece of that puzzle that I know PD providers think about, that I think about, is that the majority of those people do not want to be doing the learning experience with us. And that's major because the folks who are listening to your podcast most likely are not just doing professional development for who we call around here, we call them Saturday teachers. That's our word we developed. So Saturday teachers are people who attend the conference on Saturday. And that's a completely different world of professional development than PD that happens on Monday morning.
Mm-hmm.
So most of our learners are Monday morning people. They did not choose to come here today. So we have extraordinary satisfaction ratings. And the reasons why we do are because we design our learning experiences to solve problems that people actually have. And so we talk to people a lot about what problems they have. And then we work collaboratively together to figure out how to solve those problems. And then we work collaboratively together again to make sure that we solve the problems and that the way that we are teaching is really nailing what the learner needs. So we do a ton of design work in the background. And honestly, you couldn't do it this way if you're in a school district because when we're creating a learning experience, we're expecting thousands of people to participate in that learning experience at some point in the existence of that thing. And so we're spending many, many hours. You are doing a lot of shoot from the hip. Somebody just asked you a question and you have to give them a response right now. But I would say that when you're actually creating PD, so as opposed to solving an individual person's problem, you're creating something that is going to be delivered to a group of people. What you're doing is a lot of design work in the background to really understand the problems that the people are facing. And then you're doing a lot of design work to make sure that the way that you're delivering it is really impactful to them. So it's kind of like writing a book. Every professional development, we call them learning experiences, and we call the people who deliver them learning guides. Every learning experience delivered by a learning guide here at Fried Tech has been really carefully designed to make sure we're solving a real problem. And that's the number one piece of advice I would give.
Mm-hmm. So again, you and I are so on the same page about this kind of stuff. I think of the professional learning that I design, and when Rachel's the podcast co-host of this podcast, when we do a lot of presentations together, just like when you and I presented together, it's thinking about what's an authentic problem people really are
Yes.
having, so that when they leave, they go, wow, that's something I can that's going to change my practice for the better immediately and then long term. So this authentic problem is really good as a strategy for adults and for kids. Like if we designed lessons around authentic problems, they show up in a different way,
Yes.
And so one quick example of that is getting back to beyond worksheets, or in my book, the section, the eulogy for worksheets, is I knew I wouldn't get people to come to a learning experience that says, never use a worksheet again. Why would I do that? It's not a problem I'm having. My worksheets are fine. The kids are doing fine. It's like,
Right.
that's not going to get them through the door. What if it was, never stand in line at a copy machine again? Okay, that's a problem I'm
Now
having.
I'm into it.
Yes.
Now I'm coming.
That is a pain, and it always jams. And oh, yes. Okay. Hey, what if you didn't use that at all? What if you did this other thing with technology? And so I kind of hide it. It's not a bait and switch. It does solve the problem, but it is also solving it in a way you hadn't thought of, right? And is that
Yes.
resonate with you? Is that sort of the thing you do as well?
Yes, absolutely it does. I mean, I think my number one problem with worksheets is something that we've brought up several times already, and it's that it's just an inauthentic learning experience. Like, it creates this fake environment. And I really love working with teenagers, which is not something you hear a lot of people say, but I really like teenagers. And I think the thing that I like about them most is that they have a BS meter. It's never more finely tuned than when you're a teenager. And I'm a BSer. So, like, I can totally shovel out some of that. And kids will just, like, man, they can just catch the merest whiff of it. And they know, like, and so I think that when I understood that about working with that age group and about how that is such a touch point for most teenagers, like, I constantly was struggling with myself to be more authentic with them. And I couldn't, in good conscience, put something like a worksheet in front of them when I knew it did not have any authenticity. And I felt really good one day. I felt alternately defensive and bad, and also really good one day when one of my kids, in anger, and he was truly frustrated with me. It was early in the school year. I think this kid was a sophomore or a junior. And he said, "Miss Mayer, you do not do anything in here. You do not do any of the things that a teacher is supposed to do." And he was really, really, like, mad at me, and it's in front of the whole class. And I asked him, like, what do you think a teacher is supposed to do? Like, what is this situation supposed to be like in your opinion? And we were standing up and we were looking at something on a computer screen together because they were working in a team. And he says this to me. He said, "You never make us any worksheets. You never bring us anything that you have copied on the copy machine and give it to us to do. Like, why can't you just give us a packet on this and we can just do it and move on?" Like, I don't think you even understand how hard this is. And I thought, oh my gosh, he's so eloquent. He's probably going out telling other people this, and they're going to know I don't do any worksheets. And then I thought, why am I embarrassed about this? This kid is working so hard in English class, a subject he doesn't even care about or want to be a part of. And he is working his little fingers to the nub in here. And he's complaining about it. Like, this is all good. Like, there's nothing he said just now that I actually feel bad about. Like, so I kind of laughed and I said, like, I think maybe we have a disagreement about what the job of a teacher is, you and me. And we should talk about that some more, because I don't think that what you think my job is what I think my job is. And I think I'm doing exactly what I need to be doing. And I appreciate how hard you're working, but I am never going to make a packet out of this and give it to you. And it wouldn't work anyway. It wouldn't work if I did it. That's the problem.
Yeah. Well,
like, I could spend my whole weekend making the packet. Wouldn't make any difference.
It would work to the extent that he's used to, in that it's shallow learning versus deeper learning, right?
Yes.
I memorize the stuff, I spit it out, I get an A on the test, and then I do that over again, and that's learning. That's what I see in every TV show. That's what I see in every movie. What I've
done in every English class I had before. So
exactly.
Get me the packet.
That's why you are challenging my concept of what a teacher is. But I love this idea too of reframing it, because what did you say? The 20 people you work with, they're not teachers. They're former teachers that have turned what did you call them? The
Learning guides.
learning guides, exactly. And that's what you're doing on the side is I set up a problem. You and your team went to work at solving that problem. And then I'm the guide on the side that gives you a little feedback or points you in a direction or shows you a tool you didn't know existed that gives you, or a strategy you didn't know that will point you where you need to go, or a potential place to go to solve that problem. And that is
Right.
so much more valuable because whatever that kid does, chances are he will graduate school and then he'll be working on a team solving problems, whether he is working in the gaming industry or the AI industry, or if he's working in a medical field, whatever. It's everything's team based now, or most things are team based, meant to solve problems.
Yes, you know what it reminds me of when I start thinking about it is, and really, I think I reflected on this even at the time that this kid kind of like blew up at me. Like, you know, when your kids are little and you're trying to get them to eat their peas and you do the airplane, you turn it into a game and they open their mouth and you slip it in there and you just hope they don't notice it's peas when it gets in there, you know, and they eat it anyway. Like I thought every learning challenge you're having in front of you, somebody is like circling the peas and the spoon toward your open mouth, and just all you have to do is just open your mouth. But learning doesn't work that way. I can't, you won't learn if I do that. Like the struggle is the thing that the person who is doing the work is doing the learning. And one of the chapters in my book is called Stop Stealing the Learning, because that's what I was doing when I had my first teaching job. I stole the learning. I spent all weekend making the worksheet packet for a year and a few months before I went, oh no, this is actually not this is not actually what I'm supposed to be doing, I don't think, you know? And the thing is, I could have done it the whole rest of my career. And honestly, I don't think anybody would have said anything about it. I really don't. I think it would have been acceptable
Yeah.
to
Well,
everyone.
let's talk about that for a second, because that is where I meet the most resistance is, let's say it's well, I'll remember, this is an actual story of my son. My son was in fourth grade, and his fourth grade teacher, we were discussing different, things he could do. Activities is not a word I like, but, stuff he could do in class, right? Anyway, one of the things, and I was giving her different options, like you could try this or that, try not to be that dad, but also, like I'm a professional developer who talks about this kind of stuff. Maybe I could give you some like advice or some
Right.
technology, trying to do that in a delicate way. But her point to me back was, at the end of the year, these kids are going to take a standardized test. And my kids have always been the highest performing. And by giving them these worksheets and they do this sort of boring, mundane, shallow stuff, it prepares them for spitting it back out on the test at the end of the year, which is where I'm part of my evaluation is based on that. Our school's performance is based on that. All of society seems to run around test scores, right? So I don't feel a big impetus to change when everything is designed that way. She did. She definitely changed and grew and started to add more options based on our conversations, but not, that was many years, many moons ago. And it's still today the same sort
It's
of.
still the same conversation.
Yeah.
I've had it so many times.
So what are some of the strategies you use to convince people that your life could actually be better if you made this change? You didn't use those. What are some things that have worked for you?
Well, I think that I think this conversation sounds a little bit different in 2024. And because classroom management has become so challenging, it has become such a big part. And where I primarily heard that argument, and I'm curious if this is the same for you. So when I worked inside a school district, and I worked in technology, but I was a staff development person. So I was in charge of PD for technology, instructional technology coordinator. And our school district had 3 different areas, and 2 of them were impoverished and one of them was wealthy. And the wealthy part of our school district is where I got that argument constantly. Like, I'm not going to change because my test scores look good. Parents are happy. Administrators are happy. You're solving a problem I don't have.
Mm-hmm.
And now I am not hearing that as much because kids are not, gosh, I hate to say it like this. This is the thing I'm going to ask you to erase later, probably, but kids they're not putting up with it anymore.
Right.
Like, eesh, I hate to say it like that, but kids won't do it anymore. And so at the time, like when I was having those conversations, I was inside a school district, kids were still doing it. I subsequently left that position and went to a school district where it was probably 90% poverty across the board, poorest school district in the state of Texas. So it was a very, very poor school district. And the children themselves, like their lives, they lived at home, tons of economic disadvantage. Not one time did I ever have that conversation. So that is a conversation that comes from privilege.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't answer the question that you asked me, but I want to point out to people who are listening, nobody's probably listening who has this idea in their head in reality, but should they ever stumble across this and listen to it, you are coming from such a place of privilege that you don't even understand
Mm-hmm.
what you've got. Like it's not even, I don't even know if it's a conversation that people are having anymore. And so I'm going to throw it back to you, and then I will finally maybe actually answer your question. Are you still hearing people say this in 2024?
Yeah, I am. That's the biggest pushback that I get. But I also want to comment on the fact that what you said about kids, sort of like, especially high school kids, are like, I'm just not going to do that. I'm not sure the experience that you've designed for me, let's say this boring worksheet, that I know I just have to do and turn it in on time and get a grade on it. I don't know that that's really serving me. So I'm going to push back a little bit. I'm going to resist it a little bit more. You mentioned that, like, a BS detector. My BS detector is going way off, and I don't want to be a problem. So I'm going to just do it. But I'm also going to start pushing back a little bit more with questions and resist it. And so I'm seeing a little bit more, and I want even more of it, empowerment of all different learners to say, look, you're serving me, and this is not serving my future, right? It's serving some sort of other score or some other higher power that is not me. Let me be the
Right,
higher power, right?
right. I had a principal one time. He's now a superintendent. I just gives me a pause to even think about it. But I had a principal one time who actually called me. Like, thank goodness he just said it to me. I don't think he was saying it to other people, although maybe he was. He called me a cult leader, and I was a high school English teacher, and I was really stunned. I mean, like, he was my boss, and I like to do a good job, and I'm a really hard worker, and I definitely cared very much about what I was doing. And I knew that what I was doing was really working for kids. And so I said, why would you call me that? And what do you mean by that? And what he meant by that was actually, I think, the polar opposite of a cult leader. He's like, you get these kids and you teach them to question everything. And then they go to their other classes and they do that. Like, I don't even know if you understand what your kids are doing when they leave your classroom. And I'm like, yeah, that's good. That's
a
called
good thing.
critical thinking. And I actually got stopped in the parking lot one day by another teacher, and he asked me. He was a super, super nice, really, really humble guy, been teaching a really long time. And he said, your kids, I have your kids in first period. I said, oh, okay, well, which kids? Like, I teach over 100 kids. Which kids are you talking about? I don't know. They're your kids. Okay. And they would like me to start using rubrics. And I said, okay. And they attributed rubrics to me. And he said, yes, they said that's what you use in your classroom, and it makes grading more fair for them. And they want me to start doing that. And I said, okay, like, do you want me to help you make one? And he's like, no, I think I can do it. I just wanted you to know. Like, here they are out there causing problems, asking for things like rubrics. Like, oh my God, are you not happy? The kids know what a rubric is and they want that used in their other classes. I'm a cult leader because they asked for a rubric. Like, and I put the two situations together. I'm pretty sure that's what made me a cult leader. But anyway, I can't even remember what you asked me anymore, Chris, but
No, that's awesome.
I have
That's awesome.
stories.
I mean, you taught kids to advocate for themselves, not just the critical thinking, but how to communicate it, right? So
Right.
that's multiple skills there. And they said specifically what they wanted. It's not some
Yes.
nebulous, like, make it better. I don't know how to make it better. I
Right.
specifically am telling you, I want you to do this thing. And now
Yes.
today, in today's day and age, we have ChatGPT that could help us write the rubric and or get us started,
Exactly. It
I
can
had
make
no
the whole
clue.
thing for you. It's so much easier. But I think you asked me specific strategies, and the best thing you can do is to have your students working together collaboratively, no matter what you teach. And it really does not matter, because it's the number one skill that employers need that people come to work without. They haven't done it. They've been taught that doing a worksheet packet is, gonna get them there. And it's just profoundly untrue. So they need to be working together. And I don't mean that they're not always going to be doing the same work, like what word do I write next? That's not what I mean. It's that people are working in conjunction with each other. So they might not be doing exactly the same thing, but they're learning to be interdependent with other learners, and they're relying on other people besides the teacher for their learning. And
Mhm.
the biggest question that I hope teachers would ask then is, well, how do I do the grading? And grading is always like, it's just a minefield to even go into it. But I wrote a whole chapter about it in the book. I worked with brilliant educators who taught me when I was a teacher how to give grades fairly. And I did it for years with my own students who were working in teams with each other. And it is it's the most profound thing that I probably know. And it's in the book. There's a whole chapter about it, fair grading. It's really, really important if you're going to have students working together in teams. And you just cannot have successful teams, especially at high school, but really at any grade level, because our human need for fairness and how we are compensated, whether the compensation is points or money, is so gigantic that we cannot get over it as people, and we cannot work effectively in teams. It's one of the reasons why teachers are like, this group work or teamwork or whatever is terrible. I'm never trying this again. Well, your system that you created wasn't fair. And so people are not going to be able to do it. Like, it just won't work without a fair system.
Mhm.
So hopefully read the book, read that chapter, like really, like just read that chapter if you want. I think you can just pull that chapter out. It probably kind of stands alone. But if you're interested in teamwork, but you don't know how to do that part of it, it's so, so important. Like, don't skip that.
That's actually, again, so similar advice that, or strategies that I share is one of the first things you could do when thinking about designing more inclusively is take a step back and look at your schedule and think of the percentage of time that you have whole group versus small group versus individual. And then after you've done that reflection, how can you maximize that small group of those buckets, right? Because chances are what you're going to find is many teachers still have a lot of whole group lesson. I stand up and I talk to you for 20 minutes. How can you minimize that and maximize that small group? And then come in with your strategies about teamwork and working in those small groups, and then how you assess kids to give them feedback, and then the grades that come along with that. So awesome stuff.
I feel like that was way more eloquent than my answer, and I really appreciate it.
Well, this
Like,
is why we're a great
snaps.
team.
Yes,
We're
it is.
all right, Amy, let's last ask you this sort of last question is what is, well, we already talked about AI, so maybe AI is going to be your answer here, or maybe it's something else. What has got you curious lately? What has got you, is tickling your fancies, got you like thinking about the future? Where is education going? Maybe it's something small, maybe it's something big. What are you questing after right now? And as someone who's always learning.
Yeah, I think AI is the thing that I think about the most, because I I'm looking at a situation where, and to kind of piggyback on your what you said about how much whole group instruction there is, like AI is now giving us an opportunity to do, and I still want people to work in teams, but when you need to know something, and you need to know something, or you want to know something, like that's a very individual quest. Even if what you're taking, you're going to take back to a team and you're going to talk to other people about it, you're going to do something with the information. But never before have I been able to say, I need to be able to work this math problem, and I don't know how to do that. Can I get like an individual teacher with absolutely no judgment or preconceptions of my skills no knowledge about my previous learning experiences. Nobody's going to look at me and say, well, you should have learned this last year because we spent 6 weeks on this. Well, guess what? I didn't. Or if I did, I don't remember it anymore. Like now we have that opportunity to go to AI and actually like learn something that we in particular want to know, and nobody else in the whole world has to care about it but us. And so the thing that's got me excited is the potential for people to explore their own passions. There's nothing more powerful than understanding what an individual person is passionate about, and there is no explaining it. And what the internet has taught us is that if you are passionate, I'll tell you what a passion I saw lately is such a great example, I think. There's a woman on Instagram and she knits tiny things. So she makes like your grandma's Afghan, but it's this big and it's knitted with a little tiny knitting needle. And she has quit her job. This is her passion. She knits tiny things. I am so intrigued by her work. I look at it every day. I love it. I would probably pay to get more of it to be a subscriber. She loves that. She is enthralled by it. And it is a career for her now. And there are other people who have found her, and she is famous on social media for knitting tiny things. Like we've never had a world before where we had a tool where we could find our own weird group of people and learn more on our own with no judgment and no like, what do you want to do that for? That's not a job. Nobody's ever going to hire you or pay you to knit tiny things. Move on, learn something else, do something different. So ironically, this technology that we started out kind of saying was dehumanizing is going to create a situation where we can be more human than we ever have been, and where our humanity is going to matter more, and where we are going to be able to be more individualized than we ever have been before, because computers are finally actually going to be able to do the thing that they're good at, which is anything that is repetitive. Anything that has been done before can now be reproduced without, I mean, essentially without our help. And so it is a fine time to be a human in some ways, but got to work on the climate situation and a couple of other like worldwide problems. But it's a fine time to be a human because there's only one of any of you. And now that matters more than ever, because computers can now do things that now matter less to human beings.
Oh, so well put. Yes. And tying it back to our assessment conversation just a few minutes ago, I feel like that's where this technology can help us with individualizing those performance-based assessments. Is you can give feedback to people, like you said. You can then use that data to have cumulative results to rather than these standardized tests, right? And so,
yes.
and you can really focus it on what you really like to do. Like you said, whether it's knitting tiny little things, or playing Dungeons and Dragons, or whatever your thing is, you could use that to fuel your passion and get better at it, and use the AI to help you get better at it.
Exactly. So it's just amplifying how special it is to be a unique human being. Ironically, I think that's what is going to happen. And so I think we're going to continue to see a resurgence in craftsmanship, which is a thing I love to work with kids on, because you probably know I love to sew and make physical things out of cloth. And like that craftsmanship is really resurging, because it is like the antithesis of the AI, of the technology. And it's going to be these unique human-made things are getting more and more important. And I love that.
Oh, could not agree more. Awesome. All right. Well, Amy, take us out with where can people learn more about you? How do they learn? How do they find the book? How do they find your courses? Give us all the stuff.
Oh my gosh, I'm going to have to look up our URL because it's so new. I don't remember it yet, but I will look it up for you.
And we'll have it in the show notes for people to go click on.
Okay, great. That's awesome. Okay, well, I'll send it to you. So they can go to our website. It's fried.tech, and that's a whole URL. if you must type in www.friedtechnology.com, like if you just want to do that, you can. But fried.tech is a whole URL. You can type it in and you can learn a lot about our company, our vibe. We really try to make everything fun, and we care about design. We try to never put out anything that we think looks bad or is not readable or whatever. We have a person on our team, Lauren. I don't know if you've heard of Stickity.
No.
If you have not heard of Stickity, you need to check it out. So Stickity is a slides and docs add-on that Lauren created as her Google Innovator project. Lauren works at Technology full-time and also runs Stickity, which is the #1 education add-on in the world, I believe. And she is a user experience, really designer expert. So we have courses also on user design and how teachers can use user design, but you will see her work also on our website. And I think our website's a great place to learn, and I'll send you that URL for the book so you can really learn about the book individually. But obviously it's on Amazon and Barnes and Noble and all that kind of stuff. And this is my very first, this may be the first thing that comes out actually about the book. So thank you so much for giving me a chance to talk about it.
Oh, you're very welcome. Thank you for writing it. Thank you for coming on the podcast to talk about not just the book, but everything else that we chatted about. And I know firsthand how much work it was to either get up early or stay up late and wrestle with the wording and put it into a way that can be really digestible from people who are actually, doing the work. So thanks for creating it. I know it was a labor of love, but I also know it was a labor.
It was a labor. Yes, definitely. I felt like it was I understand why people relate it to birth. I mean, maybe not physically painful, although I think my back hurts sometimes from sitting here so long. So maybe that kind of pain too. Yeah.
All right. Thanks, Amy.
Thank you, Chris.